Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black, healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeline Black, where I have the pleasure of interviewing amazing people that I have met along my own journey, people that are resilient after facing adversity and have bounced forward in life, not just back, and are now making a difference for other people. Today, my guest is Charlie Beswick. She is a first-class psychology graduate, award-winning blogger, published author, charity founder, professional speaker, trainer, and coach. She's mum to teenagers Oliver and Harry and is a self-confessed cheesaholic and gin lover. Based on the lessons learned during her journey as a special needs parent, plunged into a world she never expected or was prepared for, Charlie shares the incredible impact of her own self-talk and empowers people to break through their own limiting beliefs to find the happiness and success they deserve in life. Welcome, Charlie. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm very good, thank you. I'm excited for this.
Thank you. So the first question that I ask everyone who comes on my show is that what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Do you know what? I think unbroken to me means stronger for breaking rather than never being broken at all. It means stronger, it means wiser. It's, yeah, that whole, I think there's phrase, I can't remember, the cracks are where the light comes through.
Yes, Leonard Cohen, I think, wasn't it?
There we go. Yes, it is. And it's a beautiful quote. And to me, unbroken just means stronger for breaking at times. I think broken tends to have sort of negative connotations with it. And I see it as definitely a process rather than an end. That's a very long answer to a really good question. But
it's amazing, you know, I ask everyone the same question and I get such varied answers, but all the same theme. But yeah, it's really great to hear your answer. So I have read your book, Our Altered Life, and I did know a lot about your journey, but yeah, that really educated me more. And when you say unbroken comes from those places where we're put under, you know, pressure, you certainly were put under a lot of pressure, and I'm sure you still are. So your journey really is one with your boys, Oliver and Harry. Can we go back to when you were pregnant, before they were actually born? How was life for you then?
Yeah, so it was a very textbook pregnancy, to be fair. I found out that we were expecting twins when I was only 7 weeks pregnant. So it was really early. And then I went into labour at 32 weeks, spontaneous labour. But I think because we'd found out so early, the idea that the boys were coming so early didn't really faze me. I was just excited to meet them. I didn't know that I was having boys. I just knew it was twins. And so, yeah, even though it was 32 weeks and I knew they'd be prem and I knew they'd be small, I was just so desperate to meet them after finding out at such an early stage in the pregnancy. So it was great. No particular weird cravings. I had a little bleed about 10 weeks, but nothing massively significant. At 28 weeks, I started losing a little bit of fluid. So there was little bits on the journey, but all in all, it was a great pregnancy. And I look back on my pregnancy now, and I really love the fact that I didn't know what was to come, and that I could enjoy that process.
And the birth itself?
So I was all geared up for a natural delivery. I'm quite, control freak isn't the right word, but I like doing things, you know, the proper way, air quotes. And so I was quite smug to be having twins. I was like, you know, there I am cooking 2 babies in my uterus because I am that good. And then I desperately wanted to birth these babies out into the world myself. And I was having a natural labour when the midwife realised that the head was actually a bum. Yes. So I was rushed into theatre and I had an emergency cesarean on the 30th of June. And so, yeah, but I was already, I think, 7 centimeters dilated by then, so it was an emergency section. So I was in and the babies were out within about 20 minutes.
During your pregnancy, labor, you had no idea that the facial disfigurement that Harry would be born with. So what was it like when you first set eyes on your boys?
So I didn't see Harry for a week. I had the boys in Macclesfield, which is in Cheshire, and Harry was taken to Manchester, so about 25 miles away from where we were, because he needed intense care and he needed some extra scans. That Macclesfield is a small community hospital, so they just didn't have the facilities that Harry needed. So I saw him for about 5 minutes at 1 o'clock the following morning. So I'd had the boys at 6:30 in the morning. So on the 31st of June, I saw him briefly, but his head was facing away from me, so I didn't see his face. He just put his little hand around my finger in his incubator, and then he was gone for a week. And then I did see him the first time, and it was just very overwhelming. I looked at my son, who, for your listeners, Harry was born with golden hair syndrome, which means that for him, he was born with essentially half a face. So no eye socket, no ear, no nostril, a short underdeveloped jaw. We were also told at that stage that he may have brain damage and never walk, because spinal complications are associated with golden hair. So there was a lot to process, and I looked at him, and all I could see was my failure. All I could see was me letting him down.
I know, in your description in the book, you said half of his face was as beautiful as Oliver's, and then the other half was as if somebody had just rubbed it out.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly that. You know, it sounded a lot worse than it looked. I didn't, when the doctor explained to me, I just thought, what if I can't even look at this baby, let alone love him and be the mum he deserves and needs? But, you know, and it didn't look as bad as it sounded in my head. But yeah, I think there was a long time that I looked at Harry and couldn't really process the fact that the one eye that he's got is absolutely beautiful. You know, it's big, it's very twinkly, it's full of mischief. And I look back now and I think, wow, he was a beautiful little baby. But at that stage, I just saw failure. I just saw the fact that I'd let him down so
much. I imagine it's the shock, but yes, you went into this spiral of guilt. What did I do wrong? How could I let this happen? And your doctor, Dr. Mona, had to convince you it was nothing that you had done that had caused the condition that Harry was born with.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the problem that we have sometimes, and this is something that I talk about now in my business, based on this understanding from real life, is that when we don't have the answers that we need, when we're not able to make sense of the world around us, we create narratives to fill those gaps. And because medical science couldn't explain it, it wasn't a genetic condition, it was just one of those things. I couldn't process that, so I needed somebody to blame and be angry at, and that became myself.
And isn't it easier always to be angry and negative with ourselves than it is with other people?
100%. So much easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, dive into the pages at that point and say, no, it wasn't you. You didn't do anything wrong. It was just, yeah, I mean, how common or rare is golden hair syndrome? What are the statistics of it?
So I think it's 1 in 35,000 at the moment. But I think Harry is at the very severe end. So as part of golden hair, children can have any of those aspects that Harry's got in isolation. It's usually a missing ear, but he has all of them. So he is much rarer in that figure, if you like, because he is at that severe end of the spectrum.
And then what followed from really not that, from when he was very young, was just operations and procedures and appointments and changing hospitals and getting second opinions and doctors, and your life just became this constant backwards and forwards, you know, reconstruction and helping him to hear, somewhere to put his glasses, you know, to hang on to his ears, and all of these how many procedures, operations has he had now in his life?
So we've had over 20 procedures. He's had his skull taken apart twice.
Yes, that was quite hard to read.
Yeah, it was very hard to live through. We were told it would be a 6-hour operation, and it was 10.5 hours. And those extra 4.5 hours waiting were horrific. They explained that Harry's skull needed just to be reshaped ever slightly and moved back. But once they took the front of his skull off, if that nicked the artery that was at the front of his brain and they couldn't stop the bleeding, then potentially he would die or have a stroke. And so, you know, 4.5 hours of hearing nothing.
Say it now quite flippantly, or potentially he could die. But imagine at the time, what a decision for a mum to make, for anyone to make, to put your child through that this could save him, but this could potentially kill him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was, in many ways, although that was the bigger operation, that was one of the easier ones, because if he didn't have the operation, then there were going to be more serious consequences for him moving forwards. Whereas a lot of the other operations that he's had have been largely cosmetic, and that's very much around society accepting him. And so I remember talking to a nurse, I think it's in the book actually, and I was beating myself up about everything. And she said, when it's a life or death situation, parents almost have no choice.
Yes.
You know, whereas when you've got a choice about whether you put your child through these things or not, it is hard, because there's a lot of recovery, there's a lot of pain, and it's you're making those decisions on somebody else's behalf. So those were really difficult decisions for me and the boy's dad.
Yeah, so you talk about a lot of them were cosmetics to help them kind of, I guess, fit in a bit more, because you have had some tough times, some really negative responses to how he looks on social media or people in the street. Can you talk about those times?
Yeah, so largely children face to face, and I understand that. You know, I understand that he looks very different and that children are naturally very curious.
Yeah.
At the beginning, when the boys were young, I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the faith, I didn't have the resolve to be able to answer or preempt any questions. And so I really struggled with comments like, your baby looks really ugly, your baby looks weird, your baby looks like a Halloween monster, what's up with your boy's face, why is he so ugly, boys don't play with him, he doesn't speak to us. So just watching my son be excluded and, you know, discriminated against and judged upon purely because of his face was really difficult for me, in the early few years, well, 2-3 years I would say, of the boys' lives.
And you say you didn't have the confidence. So what happened when you did have the confidence, when you'd hear one of these comments?
So now it's interesting because I still look for them. My ex-husband, the boy's dad, and myself, we ended up getting divorced and the boys are 3.5, but we still parent really well together. But he used to say, you go out looking for people to stare at him. And I did, because I was kind of almost battle ready every time I went out to glare at them.
Those were up.
Yeah, and give them the death stare, you know. Whereas now I still look, but I look in a way with compassion. So when I see them looking over, I'll kind of nod, lift my head back a little bit and acknowledge them and smile, or call them over if I can. Or, you know, I'll sort of get Harry's hand and wave at them. And, you know, I'm very much more proactive now than I used to be. And I think a lot of that is because I'm proud of the boy he is. I'm proud of the journey we've been on together. And there was a real pivotal moment in our journey when I realised that I couldn't keep running away. I couldn't keep hiding. And I turned Harry's buggy around to these children that had been following us around a store. And I just said, this is Harry. And I invited them over. And one little girl stroked his hand and he was smiling at her. And she said, oh, he's really cute. And I said, yeah, he is. And they asked me all these questions. Where's his eye? And I explained. And then they just ran off. And I thought, wow, it was that easy all along. Just facing my fear changed everything.
Well, it's facing your fear, but I think it was also you were just being real and authentic and honest with them and saying, well, this is him. You know, this is it. There's nothing more to it. This is just who he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now, parents struggle more than the children. So I've been in numerous situations where I've seen parents shout at their children, smack their children, physically drag their children away because they're looking or pointing or staring at Harry. And I remember we were bowling once and there was a family in the next booth. And the mum, you know, she really went to town on her son for staring at Harry. And in the end, I took Harry over and I introduced him and I said to the mum, it's absolutely fine that your son looks. It's what we do afterwards that makes the difference.
Yeah, so it's about understanding, isn't it, that he is curious looking. He's unusual looking compared to, I guess, what we call the norm. And it's just about educating people, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How did you deal, because I know on Twitter and stuff, social media, which is different to children, how do you deal with that? The negative responses?
So initially it was really hard to read comments such as, you know, he should be burned with fire, kill him, he's an abomination of God. Some, you know, really sort of personal attacks on me and Harry. But then I realized that the more I interacted with those people, or if I blocked them, they would set up another account to get at me. So for them, the mission was to get me to bite. And I was losing my power in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So now I just delete a comment, and I try not to give it a second thought. Interestingly, if I'm busy or if I'm, you know, doing other things and I haven't noticed a comment, the followers that we have which is an incredible community, will absolutely round on these people.
Brilliant.
And it's just great. And it's quite
amusing. You've got an army of light around you.
Harry has an army. He absolutely does. And so, yeah, they'll screenshot things to me. So yesterday, for example, a follower screenshot something to me on a GoFundMe page where a guy had set up a profile raising £1,000 for his son, Adam, who needed life-saving surgery. And actually, he was using Harry's face. It was Harry's image.
Oh, that's a scam.
Yeah, and he's actually got 111 accounts open that he's doing that for.
Has anything be done about this?
It's been taken down. I don't know whether that's by him, because I did send him a message saying, you know, you're a despicable human being and you've got a few hours to remove this, or I'm going public. And I did go public, and so I don't know if GoFundMe took it down or whether he did. But there's still lots of other accounts in his name, and so this is the sort of thing people are doing. And when they are taking advantage of others and others' kindness and generosity, or raising money off the back of it, that enrages me. That really does.
I didn't really appreciate that would take place. That's really actually shocked me that somebody would have the gall to do that.
Yeah, it's very sad.
So your book was great. I really loved it, reading it, and I suggest to anyone to go out there and buy it, because it was brutally honest, and you didn't hold back at all, but it was very funny as well. And you talk about the gifts that you see. There was one particular moment when you are, I think, in a hospital waiting room, maybe waiting for the big operation, and you're reading a paragraph from one of Jodie Picoult's book, and that really changed everything for you. Rather than wanting not to have had this child with difficulties and fatal disfigurement, it made you realize that if you hadn't had him, all the gifts you wouldn't have had either, and it just seemed such a turning point for you.
Yes, no, it definitely was. And I remember there was a line that said something along the lines of, if you hadn't been born the way you were, you wouldn't have been the child I love, you wouldn't have been the person that you are. And I thought, wow, yeah, if I was to take anything away from Harry, it wouldn't be the Harry that I know and love. And so that was a real turning point of acceptance for me, I think, and not fighting and grieving for what we didn't have, but really accepting and making the most of what we did have together. I should say, one of the things we haven't mentioned is that Harry is also severely autistic.
Yes,
so
you found that out later on, didn't you? How old was he when you got the diagnosis of autism?
We were quite fortunate in that it was quite an early diagnosis. So Harry was about 2.5 to almost 3 when we found out. And the signs were incredibly clear for him. So, you know, lots of parents will struggle with a diagnosis, and it can take them years and years. So we were quite fortunate in that respect.
And he still is not really verbal, is he? He's really mainly non-verbal. He does speak a little bit.
He does speak. He swears like a sailor. Let me tell you.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
yes. An additional chapter.
He really does. But yeah, you know, like a proud, awkward mother, I do think I struggle between telling him off when he swears and congratulating him for using it in the right context. So it's a real double-edged sword. But yeah, he watches a lot of YouTube, so he picks things up on YouTube, sadly. So yeah, he has key words that he wants to say, and he's developed key phrases that he will say. But if I was to introduce him to you now, he wouldn't be able to sort of introduce himself. I have to tell him what to say, and he would parrot that back. So his communication is incredibly delayed and sort of very limited. So cognitively, although the boys are 15 now, he functions around about 4 years old. So
and as a little tot, he found his own way of communicating. He would kind of just grab you by the hand and take you to wherever he needed, or any of his carers. He would just say, this is what I need. So he's very smart with it, isn't he?
Yes, he didn't want to use sign language. That bugged him. He couldn't be bothered with learning something. He just wanted me to be able to, you know, telepathically understand what he wanted. But he's very determined. He's very focused. He's very determined. And so although he doesn't have sign or Makaton, things like that to rely on, he's very good at getting his point across. So we do know what he wants. Once you're fluent in Harry, all is well in the world.
Own unique language, fluent in Harry.
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't understand was how you got up every day with the amount of sleep that you did.
Yeah, I mean,
unbroken sleep doesn't really cut it. It's just, he went to bed late, and then just a few hours later you were woken up and taken into his room.
Yeah. So I was a full-time primary school teacher when the boys were little, and as a single parent. So Harry would be awake till about 11, and I'd be marking my books till then. He'd go down sort of 11, 11:30, and then he'd be up from 3 o'clock for the day. And you can't leave a child like that because he's full of mischief. He's not, he's not safe.
He's a bit of an escapologist, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, loves to escape, still does. So, if he was awake, I was awake. And so I did that for years and years, actually. But and increasingly, I would have months and months where I could focus and cope. And then I'd have 2 or 3 days where I would just sleep. But I think, there is a reason why sleep deprivation is used as a form of torture.
I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. There is, that's what they use it for, because it deprives you of your senses. We restore and all the rest of it when we sleep. And used to, when I'm reading about when the boys would go to their dad, when you had broken up with Mark at that point, you would just sleep.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I said in the book, it clings to you like some sort of unpleasant odor, sleep deprivation, and it really changes the way you see the world and the way that you see yourself and the way that you process things. It's not being tired, they are different things.
Well, it drains your energy, doesn't it? You don't have the resources that you need.
Yeah, your health. My blood pressure shot up. I was 34 when I was taken to A&E with a suspected stroke because I'd lost my speech. It was slurring, my vision was going in one eye. So yeah, really sort of catastrophic effects of pushing yourself too hard, sort of combined with not having the sleep that you need.
And as a teenager, has your sleep got any better?
Oh, hit and miss. It's hit and miss. Yeah, I mean, yes. But if he's not well, or if he is anxious, so around the pandemic that we're currently experiencing at the time of recording this, he can be awake very early, or he can be awake throughout the night. So I touch wood. I take it a day at a time, really.
And do you still have to sit with him if he wakes up in the night, or is he older now you can leave him?
Yeah, generally I can go into him, calm him down. He will now pull the duvet back and pat the bed and wants me to get in with him, which used to be lovely. But the downside of doing that with him now is that as much as I want to comfort him, he doesn't understand appropriateness and the boundaries. And if I do that now when he's 15, he will still be wanting that when he's 35. And so for his sake, as much as I want to get in bed and give him a big cuddle and reassure him,
and get back to sleep.
Yeah, and get back to sleep, absolutely. I have to just say, no, mummy's bed, and we say mummy's bed is closed, so he can't get in my bed either.
And he understands that.
Yes, yeah, he does.
And also what I really didn't appreciate until I read your book was the impact it would have on his twin, on Oliver. It's that was quite heartbreaking. It was quite hard to read how it affected his kind of insecurities or his anxiety.
Yeah, his teacher, interestingly enough, read the book, and she said the same. She said, I never, even though I'm Oliver's teacher, and I see firsthand the physical results of, Oliver would fall asleep in class because the boys were sharing a bedroom. She said, I never really got to grips with the emotional impact of having Harry on Oliver. And even now, Oliver will struggle. We had a conversation a couple of days ago where he says, I'm not an only child, but I don't feel like I have a brother. I don't feel like I have the playmate that other people have.
Because one of the things that happens is that if somebody's crying, for example, his brother, Harry will just laugh. He doesn't see that the laughing, and maybe it exasperates it, and obviously if you're the one crying, that will just exasperate that as well. So it goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I always say the siblings of children with conditions are the unsung heroes of stories like ours. And it's a really sort of double-edged sword, because from a very young age, Oliver has been a fierce protector of Harry. And then on the flip side, can be very resentful and feel very overlooked. And I completely get all of those emotions. But that's a lot to process from about 5 years old.
Yes. Because the moments when he had done his escapology tricks and he'd managed to get away, and you just left one in the house running to get after Harry.
Yeah.
But you left me, mummy, you left me.
Yeah, absolutely. And majority of that time I always had my nan or somebody would be with me, but all Oliver saw was me dashing after Harry. And so up until probably about 2 years ago, I would say, until Oliver was maybe about 13. He was incredibly anxious about being left. I couldn't just nip into the supermarket and leave him in the car, because he'd be convinced that I'd leave from another exit. Or I'd give him the car keys and he'd say, no, I need to come with you. He's great now. He's a teenager, and as long as he's got his phone or iPad, he'll just sit and grunt at me in the car and leave me to it. Yeah. But yeah, it's been definitely, I would say, probably the toughest on Oliver of all of us.
Yeah, I know I didn't really appreciate that. I understood, the physical, like, as you talked about him not playing with him, or the lack of sleep, or but all that attention on another child is bound to have an effect on the one who isn't getting the attention. All the hospital appointments, everything, you had to put your energy into him, and yeah, that was quite tough to read, that part.
I remember Oliver. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, carry on, go on.
I was just going to say, there's a part in the book you will have read where Oliver said to me, why do you say Harry is special and I'm not?
Yes.
And it was heartbreaking, because it made me realize the language that we use is so loaded. And I'd been saying special when I meant different.
Yes. We say special needs, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. Why do people stare at Harry, Mum? Well, because he's special, Oliver. And
he has different needs.
Different, yeah. So I meant different, but I couldn't say different or disfigured or autistic to a 4-year-old. So I just used the word special. And it sort of led to a huge conversation with Oliver and I about just how very special and precious Oliver is to me. How when I feel that I'm getting everything wrong with Harry, Oliver's my reminder that I can be a good parent and I'm not always getting it wrong. And at that point I said to Oliver, you are the greatest thing I ever did. And if I ask him now at 15, Oliver, what are you? He'll say, I'm the greatest thing you ever did. And I'm like, damn right you are.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, and they both are, greatest things, because despite not speaking, despite his autism and he's a real character, isn't he?
Oh yeah, and everybody that meets him falls in love with him, and it always amazes me, not because he's not lovable, because he is, but because he actually gives so little to people in terms of traditional conversation, but the energy that he's got is so pure that people just gravitate towards him, and once they've met him, they just love him.
Well, I guess there's kind of no conditioning, there's no pretending to be someone that he isn't. He just, is Harry.
Yeah,
and every photo in the book was just one of him smiling, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, he's a real smiler.
Smiling, just his great big enormous smile on his face. How was it writing the book?
It took me almost 10 years, because it was originally just some sort of cathartic exercise for me to get everything together. I kept diary entries, I kept medical journals, I just kept everything together. And then in 16, I found myself with a bit of extra time on my hands, and I just thought, I'm gonna put it together. And I let a few people read it, a few friends, close friends that I knew would be brutally honest with me, not the sort of friends that would say they liked it even if they didn't. And they just said, you've got to publish this. So yeah, I self-published in the end. I approached a couple of publishing houses. I was very selective about who I wanted to work with. And one said no, and one never came back to me. So I just self-published in the end. And it's been a great success. So, it's kind of, I'm never going to make a living from it. I'm never going to make a fortune. But I definitely am making the difference. It's the book I needed to read right at the beginning. And I've had that as feedback, which has been great. It's
a book that you wanted to read yourself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's, as you've just said, it is brutally honest. I don't wrap anything up. I am extremely honest about the feelings, the insecurities, the doubts, the grief that I had. And lots of people have messaged me globally, because our audience is it's very wide, and said, you wrote what I daren't say. It's literally like reading my own words.
It's just like sitting down having a conversation with you. I mean, all of it, from his eye falling out, his fake, I have to say his fake eye, not his real eye, all the procedures, where's the eye gone, and all the day-to-day stuff that I wouldn't even think about, living with a child like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
there were very funny points in it as well. It did make me laugh, and at one, crying and laughing, I was filled with many emotions.
Yeah.
And your blog, did that come before or after the book?
So the blog was before. Oh no, it wasn't. It was after, actually. I published the book, and then I kind of felt a bit lost because I'd enjoyed the writing. So I thought, well, I'll just start blogging now. And again, that was, hugely popular. And I've had some amazing opportunities off the back of just writing a blog, which I never imagined. It was just another outlet for me.
Following, don't you?
Yes, so we have a great following with the blog, and I've been very fortunate in terms of I've been on Radio 5 Live presenting. I've been out to Kenya with Sense Charity as part of their mission, looking at the work they do out there. There's some talk about a BBC documentary for next year. So, you know, there's been some incredible opportunities, all because I think I got myself in the right place to share our story, and was brave enough to be honest about it, you know, and not really sugarcoat it.
I was going to say, it wasn't just sharing it, it was actually facing your fears, voicing them, speaking directly from your heart. It's very different to just, it wasn't just a regular share your book, it was very different.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I say now is what we see as vulnerability, other people see as courage.
Yes.
And you will know that better than anybody, because, you know, just sharing what can be very personal and painful for us is actually a lifeline for somebody else.
And it's actually your strength, really, at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And you started the charity called More Than a Face. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So that was, I'd written the book, I'd published the book, and that was for the parents. The blog was equally reaching out towards adults. And I thought, what can I do to help children with their curiosity? And as I said, I was a primary school teacher back then. I'm currently a high school teacher, just 2 days a week. So I've been in teaching since 2007. And so I founded More Than a Face, and I go into schools when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, and I present assemblies and then workshops around facial disfigurement and visible difference. And my tagline for the charity is seeing people for who they are and not just what they look like. And we've got Harry's Army, we've got a hashtag, we've got posters, we have competitions, I share YouTube clips, and the children and the staff absolutely love it. It's one of those things I come away and I feel just like alive. It's like a life purpose for me, is to introduce these people to Harry. And I say, you know, I call him my rat bag, because he's lovely and he's gorgeous, but he's also cheeky and he also drives me mad. And I get them to realize how many similarities there are between, you know, I ask them, who likes pizza, who likes YouTube, who likes trampolining, and they're all putting their hands up. And I'll say, that's where your commonality with Harry is. You know, he may look different, but he's got all these things in common with you. And it's, one of my, I think probably one of the things I'm most proudest of is the charity work that I do.
That's brilliant. It's really educating people as well, isn't it? And breaking down the barriers and saying, you know, he's no different. He might look a little bit different, but he's no different. He's just a regular boy, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, and lots of the children will forget what I've done, but some won't. And it's those children that will go on then to maybe raise children of their own, or have cousins or siblings. And if they see somebody out in the street that does look or behave differently, they can remember Harry and just say, oh no, let's be a bit kind. You know, let's not be so judgmental. So that's the win.
We can all do with more understanding and compassion, really, in the world, can't we?
Absolutely.
So you have very carefully taken all of your experiences and along with research, and you've now kind of tied them up into a business.
Yes. So again, I kind of help the children. And then I thought, well, what else can I do? I do like a project. I like being busy. So as well as running the charity, I founded Charlie Beswick Mindset Management. And that's very much around the things we say to ourselves about ourselves, our self-talk, coming from a place of knowing that self-deprecating self-talk can crucify us, as it did me. And also the self-talk whereby, you know, you've got to do this, you should do this, you should power through, you should be able to teach the class on 3 hours sleep, can also lead to quite dangerous consequences. And so it's about educating people on hearing their own self-talk, challenging that and finding out how accurate it actually is, and so that it can help us and not hold us back or hurt us in some cases.
And you developed a program called the Heart Method?
Yes, absolutely. So it's an acronym for the stages that I talk people through in terms of recognizing, challenging and evaluating the self-talk that they're engaged in. And I deliver that with businesses. It's very popular within education. The mindset work I'm doing with other teachers at the moment is incredibly popular. And I'm looking now to branch out into other public sectors and charity work as well. So working with people who want to make a difference to others, because often it's those industries, those people that need topping up themselves, because they're the givers. They're the ones that want to make life better for everybody else, but often, paradoxically, are quite hard on themselves.
Yeah. I guess it's paying attention to what we do. I think sometimes people do it so automatically they don't even see how they hold themselves back with their negative self-chatter.
Absolutely, and a lot of the coaching that I do ends in that realization. I've had one lady in particular just say to me, this has changed my life and will change the way that I interact with other people as well in the future. So, you know, that's amazing to hear.
Oh, it must be so fulfilling as well that actually all of your experiences, you've managed to juggle many balls in the air. You've managed to really take the best from it all and are using it.
Yes, I hope so. I'm trying my very best. Yes, I mean, for me, life now is very much about serving other people and helping them to realize and recognize that they've got the strength that they're seeking. It's just about uncovering it.
Absolutely. There's strength inside all of us, really, isn't it? We just need to find it.
Absolutely.
And what is life like now with twin 15-year-old boys?
So it's challenging in different ways. I've had the period of time where Oliver doesn't want to be kissed or hugged, or, you know, it's not cool to have mum drop you off and wave you goodbye in the morning. And that's really sad. As a parent, you kind of, you know, the last time that you're going to give them a kiss at the school gate, the last time that you're going to wave them off. I will say that I am one of those parents that likes to embarrass him on purpose. So he doesn't completely get away with it. And his friends know that, so they just laugh at me. And then with Harry, we've got the challenge of puberty and the, you know, but the understanding of a toddler. And so that's very difficult for him. So, you know, they're incredible boys. They really are. Well, young men almost. And Oliver is teaching himself Japanese. He's got big ambitions to go to Japan on a gap year next year for 10 months. So he's fundraising for that. So I'm very proud of them in very different ways. Yeah, they're just amazing boys. And
does Harry need any more procedures, or is that all the end of his operations for now?
He will in the future. Yeah, the eye socket that was made for him at Alder Hey in Liverpool, who, shout out to them, they are just phenomenal. As he's grown, has kind of stretched a little bit, and so the bottom part now is too shallow, so his prosthesis keeps falling out. So he does need it just keeps his eye keeps dropping out as you do,
as it does.
So so he will need another procedure, and actually that's going to be one of the most complicated he's ever had. So we're bracing ourselves for that one. That won't be a very easy procedure. And then following that, we're not sure. We think, by and large, I think that will be it. So yeah, me too. I think that will be it. And from there, we'll just take life as it comes. You know, a big fear for parents like me when you've got a child with autism is what happens to them when you die, because they can't just simply take care of themselves and look after themselves in the way that Oliver will. But for Harry, I have the extra concern that he looks so different that he could become a target, a very vulnerable target in society when I'm not around. And so his reconstructive surgery was very much around giving him a fighting chance when I'm no longer here, as well as, you know, getting people to accept him now.
And what do you do with those fears? That is an awful fear to have.
Yeah, you sit on them, you don't think about them, and then every now and again they come and bite you on the backside, and you're braced with it. It's if you spoke to special needs parents, it's probably the fear that paralyzes the most people. Thankfully, Mark and I have created a trust fund so that Harry is financially safe when we die, and that's taken a lot of the stress away, because we've got very strict, specific legal requirements and orders in place for what happens to him when we're not here. There's little things like, you know, where he should go for days out, how money should be spent, what sort of hobbies he should have, and that's updated on a regular basis for him. So that's helped us a lot.
So you're always working with what's going on in the now and planning the future as well.
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance between not getting bogged down with the future and really just taking one day at a time, but also being aware that there are things you can't just bury your head in the sand about.
Yes. So for anyone listening right now that has a child that has special needs, what kind of tips, you know, maybe they're struggling, they've had a recent diagnosis, what kind of tips would you give to someone that's listening?
Wow, where to start?
To stay unbroken, really.
Yeah, I think just one day at a time. Trust your instincts. Know that your best is more than good enough. And in time, and it does take time, your child will create such a better person than you are now. You know, and they'll teach you so much. You'll learn so much, and they're a blessing that you can't the situation is a blessing that you can't always see when you're stuck in that point of grief and guilt and what if and why me. But there are blessings there.
Yeah. There was one line in your book which I really loved, which I want to read out just before we end. Instead of a waltz through life, it's more of a cha-cha. And yes, it's frustrating, but we never stop dancing. Don't ever stop dancing, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great speaking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black.